raised in warmer climes will actually go through their entire process in one season. Not this one. It freezes solid every winter, and every spring the warmth comes, its body thaws, and it rushes out there and it eats voraciously and it packs it all in and it goes as fast as it can, see if it can get to that stage where it might pupate and then hatch into a moth. It takes it 14 years, and I thought, wow, if you look at that in incarnational terms or in the soul's evolutionary terms, the soul is immensely patient and urgent at the same time. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that story. One of the things I do when I travel is I have my camera and I photograph the full moon. And I've created this alphabet of light, I call it, using the light of the full moon. So some of them are just sort of random tracings, I guess you'd call them. But I have also diligently created an actual Western alphabet from A to Z, which became the hanging device, structural device for a poetry collection, which is in the bookshop. And I love the idea of us being, I initially saw it as being all under the same sky, but now I see it as being all in the same sky, which is pretty much the same thing. That then became, after an experience down in Antarctica, became fused with the ice's calligraphy, and I created this alphabet which I've been playing around with, which I'm going into more detail later. Just another quick angel, because of the angel theme. This is a painting my daughter did when she was about 4, I think, and I put it in because our incarnational stories are so linked. I mean, our soul stories are so linked, and she and I have shared a life before, I know, and this was done years and years before I went to Antarctica. And when I went into Antarctica, I discovered this little creature, which seems to me like the same creature. It's a little sea angel, a shellless mollusk, which features in a film you'll see later. So my talk is a little different from what I outlined in the abstract, because things tend to be a little dynamic and change shape as I go along. But I was recently up in Amherst visiting a friend and went to visit Emily Dickinson's house for the first time. And of course, she was a poet who was a scientist too, and made extensive documentation of plants, and a lot of her poetry is very scientific in nature. And I love what she says about much madness as divinest sense to a discerning eye. Much sense, the starkest madness. And it feels kind of Aquarian in its attitude. That as Michael, I think, said we need a little Aquarian madness for these coming times. So, and she lives next door to Lynn Margulis, who is an evolutionary biologist, who's one of my heroines, who sadly died about 3 months ago, I think, who lives in Amherst too. And she's very much tied up with my science collaborator, Sam Bowser, who is a New York polar biologist, and who was the person who invited me to go to Antarctica in 2005 with a team of researchers. This is where we stayed. I was there for 9 weeks the first time, and 7 the second time. So this very spare, brutal, fragile, exquisite landscape. I have been known to talk in terms of B, A, and AA before Antarctica and after Antarctica, because it really did change my life in all kinds of ways, both grand and subtle. But yeah, this was the environment that we lived in, and Antarctica taught me something about listening and of the value of the spaces between the notes. If we have a protest to make it quietly, that we can we can actually make our statements through the pauses and through the quieter avenues. So it was like living in a sculpture garden, and there was the ice music everywhere. I went out recording the sounds of the elements and factored them into some short films afterwards. Every day I would go walking. It was a kind of meditative exercise. I used to call it walking the labyrinth, because the ice floor was a series of cracks and fissures, and you had to actually navigate your way very carefully across the ice surface. So it was a meditative exercise. You couldn't rush over there. There was risk of falling, breaking a bone, falling through ice, whatever. So I would take my camera and photograph the ice calligraphy, the patterns that were just made from salt and changes of atmosphere and oxygen. These exquisite patterns. I'll just go through these quickly. Some of them very realistic. A rabbit in a country where there are no mammals, or no, I'm not trying to get that right. and the volcanic grit, painting rainbows. And every now and then, company, which was kind of welcome in a very flat horizontal landscape. And again. So beneath the ice, a second heaven. I'm going to read something that I wrote about what the divers down there call the Jesus beam. 20 feet below the surface of the Explorer's Cove coastline, the sea ice reveals a second heaven. Divers enter a hidden realm as celestial as any sky. Below the ice, they're simultaneously further away from and closer to the stars and planets of the upper sky, closer to and further away from the named and unnamed galaxies. They're witness to extravagant light phenomena, otherworldly ice and land formations, effervescing brine channels. Evidence of scientific research abounds on the ocean floor, specimen arrays, sediment traps, an underwater observatory named Romeo. The occasional strange crop circle, littered with abandoned shells and animal skeletons. The Jesus effect is a term divers have adopted to describe the dramatic shaft of light that streams towards them from the hole on the surface of the ice. The atmosphere is often ascribed cathedral-like characteristics, the ice above an elaborate vaulted ceiling, the light blue, diffuse. In amongst it all, the divers go about their work, drifting silently as if in a dream. One of the reasons I put this in was because the research that that the scientists were doing, that I was assisting with, was with uni-cellular foraminifera, single-celled creatures that are 650 million years old and that are gathered from the sea floor 80 feet below the surface of the ice. And we worked on some collaborative films using some bamboo boats, which I showed a little bit of last year. But what I love about this photograph more than anything is the alignment. If you look very carefully, there's a diver on the very left, left on the back, at the back, and there's a tiny sea star just to the right of the shaft of light where it actually contacts the ocean floor. And there's just something that, in esoteric terms, is so exquisite about this. How when the planets are in alignment, there's this incredible, majestic, purposeful focus and an intensity of energy, and yet there's the diffuseness that actually extends out into the outside environment. And yeah, I just love the way it actually affects everything. It colours everything. So these are the little creatures, the foraminifera. They are beautiful. The first time I set eyes on them under the microscope, my heart did a jump. They are visible to the naked eye in Antarctica. The very ice cold temperatures suit them well, so they thrive down there. Usually they are they're very, very microscopic, and you need powerful microscopes to actually bring them up into view. But there you can actually pick them out by hand in the naked eye. It's fantastic. And they are 4 different types: agglutinated, soft-bodied, naked, and calcareous. And they're responsible for much of the calcareous ones are responsible for about, I think, 25% of our Earth's carbon production. So they're very, very important, and at the very base of our evolutionary pyramid. So I found them endlessly fascinating and still do. They send these very fine, transparent little pseudopodia out into the environment, and they scout and they pick up little bits of sand, grit, and little particles from the surrounding environment, and they build these very elaborate shells, which are both protective and ornamental. Very beautiful. Some of them actually have a selection process whereby they choose only transparent grit. So when you put them under the microscope, they have the appearance of a stained glass window. Just beautiful. And obviously a process of selection is going, is at work. Ernst Haeckel was a biologist in the 1800s. I just put this in because you can see the relationship between the cosmic forms, the stars and the planets, and these tiny microcosmic forms. He was an absolute master of documentation. And I read a wonderful letter that he sent to his wife, which they were separated at the time, not separated in terms of marriage, but separated geographically. And the whole letter was consumed with his passion for what he saw underneath the ice, underneath the microscope. And I was thinking, oh, I wonder how that is for her. But it was very eloquent and poetic too. This is a little creature called Astromena rara, and research has been done on this little creature at the moment in the labs in New York. they have a habit of completing their structure, which is made of entirely opaque stones, by adding one red one. And they complete their structure with one red stone. And so, the question is, it's baffling the scientists, of course, because it raises questions of cell intelligence. And does the Astrominarera have a sense of aesthetic? This is Anotodendrodes antarcticus, the tree with more bark than bite. It too, believe it or not, is a single-celled creature. It stands about 2 centimeters at its maximum height and is very elaborate. It's a carnivore. It has been known to eat tiny brittle sea stars, and it's a predator, actually. But very wily and very rare. It's supposedly endangered because there's only one place in the world where they know that this little microorganism exists. So it's pretty precious. So I'm going to talk now about interface, which you can see the word ice within the word interface. And the interface was a marriage or conversation between art and science. So Sam and I actually worked on a project whereby he took a 7-meter sweep of charcoal drawings that were representative of the wind, the temperament of the wind that I'd done for an exhibition. And he shrunk them down from 7 meters, that's just a sample of one of them, from 7 meters to a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter square nanolithographic plate, which he then etched in 4 color tones. Then he actually presented, instead of a glass slide, which is topographically boring and has no features, and is the traditional way of studying specimens in a lab. Instead of that, he presented the foraminifera with a quasi-Antarctic landscape to explore. And what we did then was document their behavior to see whether it actually made any difference. And the remarkable thing was that it did. So it was very exciting. We went back and forth in a process where Sam taught me how to use the microscopes, the scanning electron microscopes, and he worked in my studio for a bit, and we swapped our disciplines. We learnt each other's disciplines, and then had this exchange whereby it was an art interpreting science and a science interpreting art process. And what we ended up with, those are some of the drawings. So that's a scanning electron microscope photograph with a drawing interpreting it. What we ended up with then was essentially, I think of it as a floating mandala. So it was an artwork created out of the raw ingredients of scientific research. So each circle, there were 7 concentric circles, and I laid them out using sacred geometry and phi as a kind of map. But each circle represents a different stage of the research process. So if you look at it, the idea was that it makes the science accessible to the lay public and and operates as well as an artistic piece that has allusion to perception and the iris of the eye and the lens of the camera and the lens of the microscope and the mandala being the contemplative form. And Sam is a self-confessed skeptic when it comes to esotericism. But it was interesting for us to have this conversation because we both stretched each other's boundaries quite significantly through this project. And there was a real kind of truth to material, art and science. We used canvases and beakers, and the relation to the conversation went right through the materials. It's just another one of it. And this is it being mounted. It was initially presented as a horizontal piece on a platform. So it floated. It's now actually in the Wadsworth Medical Center in New York, so it's a vertical piece now. So continuing with the science, Sam sent me this image and the DNA code for this creature called Gromia, which is also a single-celled creature. And he said to me, here's the DNA, because I'd expressed an interest in DNA. And he said, here's the DNA, see what you can do with it, can you make a poem out of it? And so that is the entire sequence of the Gromia. So that's a concrete poem, really, of the Gromia itself. And of course, those are the Gromia gametes, exploring the poem, reading the poem perhaps, dancing with the poem. We had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. I was just putting DNA sequences onto children's school chairs, and one thing leads to another. And this is going back to the image that I showed you right early on, which is some of the art images, the ice images and the moon calligraphy kind of married together to create a new code. that I thought would be fun to play with DNA. So each of those, if I was to sort of go through them, they each have some significance that also would relate to the esoteric language and the very basic natural language, natural world. So along the way, he sent me this image, which is a scanning electron microscope showing the cell walls of the gromia with these strange stars in the background, if you can see them, those white sort of ablated stars. So I wrote to him and said, what are those? Those actually interest me more than the gromia's cell wall. And he launched into this very intricate description of ablated plastics and, temperatures and all kinds of things. And I said, no. I'll write you a poem. This is what I think. So I sent him a poem. This is the poem I wrote. It's called Quandary. And that is the DNA extracted out of, this is what I've been doing, playing with the DNA of poems. So I'm going to read you that poem. Quandary. How odd you've not seen these crater stars before, Sam. Perhaps the gromia's intelligence leads them to consider there may be some sense in beautifying their sterile laboratory environment. Well, why not, Sam? Why not? We place them in our time frame, but Explorer's Cove is their domain. 350 million years ago, the same purple scallops and luminous white sea stars graced the Foram seabed. We are the newcomers here, the strangers passing through. We haul them to the surface, intent on finding answers to the universe. And yes, they show us many things. But here we are now, talking, and there they are, silent and ancient as always. We translate what we think they know into what they know we cannot understand. And as for these crater stars, imagine the ripples through the science community when you say you've discovered the world's oldest one-celled creature designing wallpaper for the heck of it in your petri dish in Albany, New York. But wait, there's another possibility. Perhaps your gromia missed the old Antarctic sea stars, and these strange shapes are simple expressions of their dreams for home. The gromia DNA had another iteration when I worked with this a friend and scientist in Australia who is a shakuhachi player. A shakuhachi is an ancient traditional wind instrument, Japanese instrument, and a very difficult instrument to play. And I'd really, because of seeing DNA code, it's suggestive to me of music, of a percussive, it has a sound kind of effect to it. I really wanted to hear it to music. And he very patiently transcribed the whole code into Japanese music. And I created a film for him, and it was a silent film, and it was expressing something of the environment in which they live. And so I gave that to him, and it was for a conference in Australia. So it was a backdrop, and then he played this piece, which looks like this. And when I saw it, I burst into tears. I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. And for me, the form of it, and he's not a diver, but the form of it is like the sediment rain that comes through the ice ceiling that actually rains into the environment that these gromia inhabit. I just thought it was so beautiful. The music itself was really strange, I'd have to say. The limitations of CTAG translated into Japanese language, musical language. There was not a lot of variety, and it was 9 minutes long, so it was quite a challenge for the audience. So I thought I would respectfully look at the great invocation using DNA, as extracting the DNA out of it, just to see, out of interest, what was there. And this is just showing the process of the actual prayer, then highlighting the DNA letters in the prayer and then extracting them. So you just have the TCAG letters. And I just had an interesting conversation with William actually about this, because DNA with its 4 nuclear bases and its relationship to the 4 etheric subplanes, is that right? Have I got that right? I just thought there's maybe something here. I'll read this because it's easier for me to read this. I'm still getting my head around it. Every thought generated in the human mind, mental body, is subsequently imprinted into neurological patterns within the brain. The role of the etheric body is to facilitate this imprinting process It is this that makes it possible for us to have a brain realization of any kind. In addition, emotion generated by the astral body must first pass through the etheric body as well. By so doing, it will be translated into an endocrinal response. Finally, in the process of incarnation, the physical body is formed by the instructions conveyed to it by the soul via this subtle etheric sheath. Herein is a significant point as it pertains to DNA. If DNA is a coding that determines all physical traits, as we are told by geneticists, then there must be subtle etheric signals that underlie this process. When we consider the etheric body a bit further, we learn that it has four divisions to it. In other words, it is composed of 4 subplanes, each of which represents a type of energy. Each of these etheric forces uniquely underpins all that is in physical form. They thus provide the scaffolding and blueprint for the formation of every characteristic in the human body. This is intriguing. If there are 4 etheric vibrations that inform and give instruction for the formation of all features of the physical body at the behest of the soul, and there are 4 essential nucleobases foundational to the genetic code found within our DNA, then it seems likely that C, G, A, T are the externalized effects of the instructions coming from the 4 etheric subplanes. So this is a conversation that we're having at the moment, and this is the great invocation, as I've interpreted it through the DNA. It is such a beautiful, beautiful prayer. Now I'm going to speak a little bit about a friend of mine, Christina Breyer, who is an artist who's based in South Africa, who works with periodicity and mathematics and sacred geometry. And she's one of the artists that Sam and I worked with down in Antarctica. She saw this creature and fell in love with it. Got very excited and said, "Can I please create something for you to take down to the ice that's an interpretation of these single-cell creatures?" So we were delighted. This is an amazing one. As it evolves, it starts out its life as a triangle, and as it gets older and develops, it becomes a square and then a hexagram, and then it gets progressively more complex. It keeps adding an apex to its structure. And the most complex one they found so far is 12-sided. But this is what she created, a series of these very beautiful, incredibly fragile porcelain forms that we photographed, and the divers took 80 feet under the ice, and I used them in films, etc. Of course, they're terribly fragile, and some of them got broken on the way, but nothing is ever lost in science. And I show this because I'll come back to that. These are some of the shards which have been crushed up, tumbled so that all the edges are rounded and softened, and have been given back to the foraminifera to work with. The reason being that the clay bodies incorporates material from the White Cliffs of Dover. Part of their makeup is foraminifera and coccolithophores. I mean, they're fossil rich. So it's kind of like giving these living creatures the bodies of their ancestors to create more art out of. So that's what's happening in the labs at the moment. And interestingly, this huge section of the White Cliffs of Dover just sloughed off about 3 weeks ago while I was putting this together. So it was an interesting serendipitous correlation, yeah. But because this is Christina working on a piece that she made for Ibiza, the island of Ibiza. And I didn't know about this, but I met her in South Africa in January. And she said, "What are you doing this year?" And I said, "I never really know what I'm doing, but I do know that I'm going to Phoenix in April and I'm going to Ibiza in April." And she said, "What are you doing in April in Ibiza?" And I said there was a conference there, and I told about this conference. And she said, "Well, I've installed a 5-meter by 2.5-meter installation on the island. You'll have to go and visit it." And then she told me the story of how it happened. Of course, getting all these tiles from South Africa to Spain was a huge mission, and she happened upon a conference of medical people. And I think she had some family relative who was involved in this conference, and who it was convinced all these delegates at this conference to take 5-kilogram bags of terracotta tiles back to England in their suitcase. And so somehow she got kilograms of tiles across to England. And then the folk who lived in Spain, who commissioned her to do this piece, drove up to England, gathered up all the tiles, and they drove them through Italy, France, etc., down to Spain. And this is her working on it. What she didn't know, she was there for four days. What she didn't know Well, I'll go back a little bit. She got about 2/3 of the way through it to, if you go a third up the bottom unfinished circle, about a third way up, she'd done the first bit and she got stuck. She didn't know what to do. So she went for a walk around the island and she just took some time to just, tune in with the energy of the island and take her time with it. And when she came back, she knew exactly what to do and she completed it. And the architect, when he saw it, said to her, "That's Tanit." And she said, "Tanit?" She'd never heard of Tanit. Tanit, of course, is the Phoenician goddess, the protector of the island. And that was just, kind of wonderful in terms of the solar angel too, of, the solar angel kind of being there ahead of her, So it was very wonderful. And I'm showing this because I did go to Ibiza and I was there for a conference in the human design system, which I've been finding extremely interesting and compelling. And I just wanted to share a little bit. I feel, just moved to share something of my experience of it. And my time there, it was an incredibly potent island. I didn't realize this, but I don't know if you can see, there's actually there's an aura around the top of that outcrop. It's amazing. That's an island called Esvedra. And there are rumors around the island that either it's Homer's island of the Sirens, or that it's the tip of Atlantis. So there are lots of stories around this island. It's a very potent place. How am I doing timing-wise? At this point, I might just do a little digression because I'm going to try a link and see if this works. Because the human design system is also, it's one of the new sciences, I think, and there's a lot to do with neutrinos in the human design system that I thought I'd just take us all on this interesting journey. I don't know if any of you have seen this extraordinary thing on the web, but you can zoom. All the way out. It's worth actually getting this link. I made a reading list or a list of sort of resources if anyone's interested. But if you click on any one of those items, there's a whole lot of information about it. I just think it's amazing. The graphics are just absolutely incredible. So I'll just go quickly through this because I can give you the link for this, but it goes on and on, out and out and out and out and out and out, etc., etc. And then, of course, I'm going to go make you dizzy. Hold on to your seatbelts. But I'm going to go right in as well. I'll slow down a little bit. But don't we live in the most remarkable world? How can we not be awed? There's the DNA, all these little links. And somewhere in here we finally meet a neutrino, way beyond these subparticles and all these extraordinary names, some of them quite unpronounceable. Here's the first one, a high energy neutrino. Did you see that? Anyway, and it goes on and on until we get to the even smaller denomination. But that's I just really wanted to share that with you because I boggle every time I see it. Now I have to find where I was. Sorry, where was I now? Oops. Oh, there you are. So, this is my version of a neutrino ocean. I was just having fun playing in my studio, and the neutrinos are remarkable things. I'm going to actually read a little bit because I need a little bit of help with some of this. Before I do, I just want to mention Jan Dietrich, who I really miss, actually. I'm really sorry she's not here. But Jan Dietrich just wrote a wonderful paper recently called A Sea Change, Neptune and Pisces, 2011 to 2026. And in it she said, this new era will hasten the end of the Piscean age and replace negative manifestations of organized religion with a more wholesome and synthetic universal perspective. It will introduce aspects of the New World religion, pertaining to transcendental mysticism, occultism, and religion to the awakening public, and bring us collectively into a deeper understanding of the inner workings of the human and collective psyche. We are told in the New World Order, spirituality will supersede theology, living experience will take the place of theological acceptances. The spiritual realities will emerge with increasing clarity. Dynamic expressive truth will be the keynote of the New World religion. And that's from the Externalization of Hierarchy, page 202. So the human design system is a synthesis of two streams of science, traditional and modern. The traditional sciences, astrology, both Eastern and Western, the Hindu Brahmin chakra system, the Zohar or Kabbalah, and most importantly, the I Ching, the Book of Changes. These are the traditional elements in the synthesis that makes up human design, which I'll show you a chart. It's just really interesting. So I was at this 25th anniversary conference there in Mesa, as I say. I first encountered my first body graph in 2005, which was a year of incredible upheaval in my life. Just enormous change, a lot of, one of those destructive, transformative years. And somewhere in the midst of that, I happened upon this graph, and something about it sort of stayed with me. But I was too caught up in life and work and interlocking projects that kept me kind of really occupied for the next 5 years. But then I re-encountered this again last year, and my interest was again piqued, and I felt this deep resonance with it. So I thought, well, I'm going to explore this and see what's there. I don't know if it's familiar to any of you at all, but I just feel like I just need to just name it, and my own experience of it, because I'm somewhat skeptical by nature, and I'm a person who's reluctant to speak in terms of absolutes. But I did enter a process of exploration and discovery that's been a combination of surprising and revelatory and actually very healing for me. And it's the healing part that I'm interested in, I think, in terms of this as a system that interfaces beautifully with the esoteric wisdom and with esoteric astrology. And what I find interesting about it too is its inclusion of the new sciences. So it speaks of the neutrinos and the information that actually penetrates our body systems, via neutrinos, that carries with it information from the planets and the sun, and it just makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. So, without going into it in too much detail, I'll just show you this chart, which is interesting because it's the mandala with on the outside are the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, which of course relate to the 64 codons of the DNA, of a DNA sequence. So that's a really interesting correlation. And then there's the astrological, the horoscope with all the planets, and it's a slightly different system of chart mapping, but the body graph contains what is described as, I suppose, neutrino information. Information that comes in via that means, and activates certain aspects of the body graph chart, and all of that has particular significance. And of course, it's very, very complex. This is also very, very simple on one level, but very, very infinite in its possibilities. And I do think it may have a very strong healing purpose. Certainly it feels that way for me. So I just wanted to just pop that out. Getting nearly to the end, I want to finish with a film, actually. So I'm going to just speak very briefly about the stations of light, or the constellation of light, referencing the Blue Rose Sisterhood meditation that we did recently, and a number of online activities or prayer circles, meditation circles that happen that are deeply connecting and powerful ways of meeting and of breaking down the barriers that divide us in terms of geographic distance and ideology. And this idea of the Meta Sangha, I put that in with this because these boats feature in this film, and each one of them looks like everyone else, but in fact each one is very, very distinct, and on their own they're flimsy and mean nothing, but if you put them together they actually become a strong armada, like us in the group. We're all distinct and individual, but when we put our energies together in a way that's transformative, and for the higher good, anything is possible. So I'm running out of time. My movie is going to be 2 minutes longer than that. Is that all right? I won't say any more. I think I'll just play this film. And hope it'll come on. Is there sound? Sorry? Oh, sorry.
Blue is vagabond amongst colours. Reckless, untamed, it disembodies whatever becomes caught in it. Once I brushed the surface of a boat blue. Within a moment, there were the ocean and sky, no longer a boat in view. And have you heard? Blue has an appetite for monsters, stampeding and billowing like shapes fall into themselves, slip down the throat of blue into water, the inside colour of glass. In the wide sound of the sea, the song of a vast adventure, a music that follows flight paths of blood rushing through veins, and the roar of the sea is the roar of our planet. The oceans are hoarders of holy mysteries, generous to a fault, all heaving movement, energy and gorgeousness. Life packed into every inch and drop of it. It's drama, it's secrecy, it's secrecy. The way it carries so much of the past, the future and present in it. Dream of the sea, and from its edge, gaze out to the pencil-thin line of the horizon, where sky and water are one. And the sea, how it murmurs, how it murmurs. Salt, spray, ice, sand, each wave a limb of the earth. It is all one water. A finger in a tide pool brings our shores together.
Sorry, it's a bit jumpy. I see I made the very big mistake of not switching off the internet before we did the film. And there's a background hum. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to finish that. I don't know how to do it. so sorry. I couldn't leave the film and turn that off, so it kind of muddled everything up a bit, but never mind. Sorry? You would never have known. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, on that note, that is me, and thank you so much for your company. Thank you.